The National Rifle Association has been one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, lobbying groups in America.
The NRA is very powerful, not just because it has a lot of money, but because it has a lot of sway with single-issue pro-gun voters.
It says that it has about 5 million members committed to gun ownership and the Second Amendment.
We're all just wanting to exercise our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves, protect our property.
I love the NRA. I love the Second Amendment.
They've mobilized the single-issue voter on this topic up and down the entire ballot, and they've successfully done that for years.
There's a shooting! There's a shooting!
Gun violence in America?
Yes.
We need more guns.
But at the peak of its power, the NRA finds itself besieged by scandals and legal challenges that threaten its very existence.
Executives of the NRA are accused of looting the powerful gun rights groups to the tune of millions of dollars.
Gun owners across America should be horrified by what I saw inside of the NRA.
An unchecked corporation with too much power.
It's fighting against attorneys general in New York, in Washington, D.C. It's fighting a legal battle against its former advertising agency. It's spending millions and millions of dollars on legal bills.
There was a vicious civil war between Wayne LaPierre and Oliver North, and it was very dramatic and very expensive.
It has had large-scale layoffs.
And it does seem that the NRA is having a lot of trouble.
While trouble does not necessarily mean their ultimate demise, there is no doubt that in recent years, the NRA shot itself in the foot. The NRA wasn't always all-powerful, or even political for that matter.
The NRA was formed in 1871 by two former Union soldiers. Many people in the North just didn't know how to use guns, and so the NRA's mission was to train people how to use guns in the event there's another war.
It remained a non-controversial gun safety organization for over 100 years. Its earliest foray into politics can be traced back to the National Firearms Act in 1934. This major piece of gun control legislation was actually supported by the NRA, something the NRA of today would consider heresy. It would take another 5 decades for the humble nonprofit to transform into a pro-gun lobby group and ardent opponent of gun regulations it is today.
The NRA became a little more political starting in the 1970s and really ramped up its political efforts throughout the 80s and 90s, pushing back on any efforts by states or Congress to restrict gun rights through background checks or waiting periods before guns could be purchased.
From my cold, dead hands.
The NRA raises its money from membership fees and donations from wealthy individuals and gun manufacturers. But it isn't just one simple nonprofit organization anymore. Along with its political transformation came a multitude of offshoot foundations for varying purposes.
What we call the NRA is really a number of different organizations. It has a political spending arm, and it has a charitable foundation. The organizations have to keep separate books, but they don't have to operate fully independently of one another, and indeed, they're all basically run by Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA.
Wayne LaPierre is basically a walking, talking iteration of the National Rifle Association.
He's not an avid shooter himself, but nonetheless he's been a very effective lobbyist for gun rights and been a very effective spokesperson for the NRA.
We're never going to stop fighting for your right and folks just like you all over America to have the right to defend themselves.
Newtown 911, what's the location of the emergency?
Sandy Hook School. I think there's somebody shooting in here.
LaPierre became somewhat of a household name in 2012 when he offered a defensive and seemingly tone-deaf response to the school massacre at Sandy Hook.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
NRA, stop killing our children.
The NRA does best when it's under attack.
The NRA
During the Obama administration, you had a spate of tragic mass killings in the United States, and this put the gun world on the defensive. When people feel that their access or their ability to obtain and keep guns is threatened, that's when they support the National Rifle Association.
And indeed, it was boom time for both NRA membership enrollment and gun sales in America. Under the leadership of LaPierre, the NRA was credited for defeating President Obama's legislative agenda for stronger gun regulations in his second term.
All in all, this was a pretty shameful day for Washington.
And of course, the NRA was an early backer of the Trump campaign.
The Second Amendment is so important. They're not going to take your guns away, folks. They're not going to take your guns away. Not going to do it.
The NRA went to great pains to get Donald Trump elected.
I'm officially announcing the NRA's endorsement of Donald Trump for president.
And they were able to amass very large sums of money for Donald Trump, $30 million and about $54 million for the entire election, and they were very successful.
The election of Donald Trump in November 2016 seemed to signal that the NRA was at the peak of its power.
High on its own success, the NRA ventured to launch NRA TV, an ambitious online media network dedicated not only to gun culture, but to the culture wars in general.
Satan hates everything good about America, so does Kaepernick.
Men were made to create, they were made to conquer.
Much of NRA TV was filled with right-wing screeds against immigration, against journalists, against fake news, against liberals.
Not all Muslims are radicalized, but all radicalized terrorists are Muslims.
But NRA TV turned out to be a resounding failure.
I never would have imagined these little neat pockets and hidden closures.
Not that many people were watching it, and it was very expensive for the NRA to produce.
The answer to the question, what the is NRA TV, is it's just a vessel to sell America guns. That's pretty much it.
NRA TV was a bad business decision for the NRA. It cost the NRA something like $40 million and got very, very few viewers.
The failure of NRA TV eventually came back to haunt them and ultimately led to the first real signs of trouble for the foundation.
I see it. It was the white hoods and the burning train tracks. Okay, fine, fair point.
Now, I should warn you, this is where things get complicated.
The NRA's troubles really began in October of 2017 when New York State launched an investigation into an insurance product called CarryGuard, and it turned out the NRA didn't have the right permits under New York insurance law to be selling this insurance, and that caused the NRA to hire a new lawyer, a fellow by the name of William Brewer. He warned that the NRA was likely to be further investigated by the state of New York.
Brewer suggested that the NRA conduct a full-scale internal audit to ensure their books were in order, a large part of which involved tracking the enormous expenditures incurred by their longtime PR agency, Ackerman McQueen. Among other PR services rendered during their decades-long relationship, Ackerman McQueen billed $40 million for the NRA TV project. This included a large undisclosed salary to then NRA President Oliver North, theoretically an unpaid position, for his appearances on NRA TV.
I spent my life with those who relish a good fair fight.
He was making a salary of apparently over $1 million a year. And the NRA said, we need to review that contract. But it's really only the tip of the iceberg. It turns out that the NRA and Ackerman McQueen had profound disagreements. Ackerman McQueen responded by detailing to the public that Wayne LaPierre and other people who were at the head of the NRA were taking advantage of the NRA's charitable status, using it for personal expenses, such as expensive travel to the Bahamas, shopping trips in Beverly Hills, where Wayne LaPierre would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it even came out that Wayne LaPierre had a secret $17 million golden parachute contract.
Oliver North had been pressing the NRA's board to investigate the NRA's expenditures, including with Ackerman, McQueen, and even the NRA's law firm.
In April of 2019, the NRA filed a lawsuit against Ackerman McQueen for overbilling and lack of transparency, just days before The New Yorker dropped a bombshell report alleging corruption on a staggering scale, with a particular focus on the questionable relationship between Ackerman McQueen and the NRA.
So the New York Attorney General alleges that the NRA was using Ackerman McQueen's expenses to enrich its leadership through improper spending.
The New Yorker article quoted a former IRS official in charge of overseeing tax-exempt organizations as saying that the NRA had a litany of red flags that were, quote, just extraordinary. Ackerman McQueen and Oliver North have not responded to requests for comment, and in court filings, Ackerman McQueen has denied the NRA allegations. All this acrimony made for a tense annual NRA meeting the following week.
Oliver North threatened Wayne LaPierre, said he would disclose information about his incredible spending with the NRA's money on personal expenses if Wayne LaPierre didn't step down from leadership of the organization.
LaPierre quickly retaliated and accused North and Ackerman McQueen of trying to carry out a coup.
Oliver North brought his issue to the board, but when the board meeting ended, Wayne LaPierre was still there, and Oliver North was out as president. And indeed, in the months to come, Wayne LaPierre would purge virtually all of the Ackerman McQueen supporters, including Chris Cox, the head of the NRA's legislative arm and lobbying arm.
And before long, LaPierre was standing alone.
But for LaPierre, it was a Pyrrhic victory.
So the internal fight was over, but it had the effect of triggering what became the New York Attorney General's lawsuit against the NRA.
Enter Letitia James, the new sheriff in town.
So Letitia James is a Democrat, and she was elected back in 2018 to become New York's top law enforcement officer. James ran on a platform of challenging Donald Trump, but she was also highly critical of the NRA, which she accused of being a terrorist organization, a claim that the NRA claims is defamatory and false.
But it was the revelations that came out of the Ackerman McQueen lawsuit that really provided her a basis to go after the NRA.
So Attorney General James rolled up her sleeves and dug in, obtaining sworn testimony from key players, including Oliver North, and reviewing thousands of pages of documents, many of which the NRA attempted to withhold from her, especially when it came to any information pertaining to their relationship with Ackerman McQueen. But eventually, James had seen enough.
It's clear that the NRA has been failing to carry out its stated mission for many, many years, and instead has operated as a breeding ground for greed, abuse, and brazen illegality.
The NRA has denied New York's allegations, calling the lawsuit a baseless political attack on the organization.
Around the same time that New York filed its lawsuit, the District of Columbia Attorney General Carl Racine, also a Democrat, filed a separate lawsuit against the NRA and the NRA Foundation, accusing the foundation of allowing charitable funds to be used for improper purposes.
On October 19, 2020, the NRA filed a response to the New York Attorney General's lawsuit asking to have the case dismissed, calling it the capstone of a partisan election interference project.
It's anyone's guess when the judge will respond to the NRA's request, and this really is just the beginning of the case.
What we do know is that the NRA has been hemorrhaging money on fees to combat ongoing legal battles on every imaginable front.
Part of the NRA's financial situation comes from incredible legal fees. William Brewer and his law firm have been charging the NRA more than $1.3 million a month.
A filing by Ackerman claims that Brewer's law firm has collected $54 million in the 2 years of representing the NRA. In a leaked audio recording, LaPierre told surviving board members that the NRA is in serious financial trouble.
The cost that we bore was probably about a $100 million hit in lost revenue in 2018 and 2019.
That was back in January 2020, before the filings in New York State and DC. Not to mention the layoffs it's had to do after the coronavirus outbreak. So they can only expect to keep spending a lot more. To add insult to injury, recently ousted Joshua Powell has released a tell-all book with first-hand accounts of alleged misconduct across the board.
It is an abomination of members' money that what's gone on over the past 30 years. It's to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in wastage.
The allegations make you seem like part of the problem, though.
I understand that.
He's blaming his own misdeeds in many ways as just part of the culture of the NRA. And indeed, it does appear increasingly likely that there was a culture of the NRA where leadership basically treated the organization like a personal piggy bank.
The NRA rejected Powell's allegations.
So right now, the NRA is in full defense mode. This means that millions of dollars that the NRA would normally spend on lobbying and donations is being spent instead on law firms and legal fees, just at a time when they're fighting for their survival.
There's no ending to this story yet, and it's far too soon for the NRA's enemies to do a victory lap. LaPierre is working hard to paint himself and the organization as the victim of vicious partisan attacks.
And if they think they're getting our guns, I'm just telling them 1776 is going to kick off again.
The NRA is using these existential threats to gin up support and raise the money needed to dig itself out of dire straits, beat all the cases against it, and come out stronger than ever.
Although the Attorney General has sought to dissolve the NRA, that does seem like an unlikely ultimate outcome from this. I think it is very possible that the NRA will be hit with significant fines and be forced to remove certain members of the board like Wayne LaPierre.
Regardless of the outcome, there's a universal lesson to be learned here, as old as time itself.
The NRA's downfall seems likely to come from its own hubris. One of the dangers of being the most powerful political organization in America is you feel that no one can beat you. But New York Attorney General Letitia James has got something to say about that.